12:05. Let's go ahead and get started. Got a great program today. And as a reminder, please silence your cell phones. As you know, if they go off, there will be hefty fines. For guests and visitors, my name is Steve Perley, Club President. I'd like to welcome you all to the 20th meeting. Should have been the 21st, but we won't talk about that again. It's the 20th meeting of the 48th year of the Dublin Worthington Rotary Club. Today's invocation of pledge of allegiance will be offered by Mr. Winowitz.
Gracious Father, we gather today as Rotarians. We're thankful for the events of the week, of the month, of the Advent season. Help us to feel and be with you this Christmas season. The Advent says there's a forthcoming. We look forward to 2023, hopeful and mindful that we are still a very graciously blessed nation. We thank you for our lives and for our community. Help us to respond to your need. Amen.
Well, which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Wynn. Teresa couldn't make it with us today, so we've got Jim Farmer filling in to introduce any visiting Rotarians guests.
We have two visitors today that I'm aware of. Gretchen Narciso, would you please stand and introduce yourself? She's a CPA and I think about to become a member of our club.
Yeah, I'm inducting her today.
Okay. And also Linda Stevens stand by today to just visit our club. Linda, would you please stand and introduce yourself?
Linda Stevens from Dublin, and we have been retired for 7 years.
She's thinking about becoming a member, so be nice to her.
We have another business.
Check this out on our website, website of the other Dublin Rotary Club. I mean, she's checking this out, so you guys better behave. She also has she's doing, you know, her husband are doing mission trips to the Dominican Republic, in the Haiti area. So she has a connection already to our club, so I don't see how she could resist that.
And there's the hard sell. Thank you, John. All right. Thank you, Jim, for introducing our guests. Sergeant, Mr. Jared Katz, make him pay.
Get out your $30.
Thought it was 4.
I think it was 5.
I think the pot must be back at the back table. I don't see it up here. I see, oh, there it is. I see Jeff Apple back there trying to talk to people. So come up here, Jeff, please, and get the pot, prime the pot.
Trying to get a donation.
Well, that's okay. You're gonna get a lot of donations in the pot, and then you can get them to match it.
You committed a lot of money, now it's all gone.
First, before the sergeant takes off, so I don't have to come back up here for announcements. Your treasurer will be accepting today and in the future donations in the memory of Frank Dunbar and Richard Hunter, both on a sad note. But if you're wanting to make a donation to their memory to the foundation, just write a check. You can give it to me. You can mail it to the post office box, whatever. you'll be recognized. And the family, of course, will be notified. So, happy dollars today. Who's got some happy dollars, even if they're not happy? Well, there's Darnell. He's happy, I know, because he smiles all the time.
I'm happy because we delivered gifts this weekend. Everything went pretty well anyway. Roger was able to get there. And we delivered gifts to over 20 families and about 15 children. So it made for a merry happy Christmas.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Darnell. Mr. Zinn.
Well, Jerry, I was kind of waiting for a self-imposed fine by the sergeant, but I didn't hear it, so I want to put in a happy dollar to be matched by a happy dollar from a guy that forgot his cell phone on Saturday. Yeah.
I left it in his vehicle, that's all. It was safe kept, so no big deal. I'll put in my fine.
All right.
And Dave Kittredge.
Happy to be back in the USA for 10 productive days in the Dominican Republic. I'm blessed to be back. But it's really good to be back.
Thank you. Good. And thanks for representing us. Mr. Allen.
Hi, I am very happy to be a part of our foundation, and I'll put a happy dollar in for that. I'm happy that our foundation continues to, on a regular basis, help the families of our community. And I would ask that if you're looking for someplace to put some money, especially out of your IRA, if you haven't taken your required minimum distribution and you're 72 years of age, maybe consider something on the foundation. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's probably worth more than $1, but that's okay.
The club is still at 72 and above.
Yeah. There's only 3 of us in our hospital beds in the back. So, John, you had a
The theme, I just want to, I'm happy that club members donated or bought poinsettias for those in senior living communities. We delivered Jim and I 14 centers, and so thank you. They're all very appreciative, and we need to let you know how much they thank you for thinking their residents.
Very good, thank you. Not yet. Joe?
I'm happy because our overly conscientious son has gotten his Eagle Scout Board of Review approved, and so he is now an Eagle Scout, and he's got his college admission score in now, so he's getting acceptances. So our overly nervous boy is calming down a little bit.
Okay, very good.
Well, I should let Dr. Rice tell you, but it was an improvement of the preschool at the church there. Oh, and he's acknowledging sin wise. Thank you.
Very good.
He did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, well, he comes from a line of overachievers, so that's probably what we expected. So, Ms. Barnhart.
I'm happy to see Gretchen and Linda here today.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. We're all happy for that. Pete.
Along with Judy, I'm happy to be back for 10 days.
Pete's not happy to be back for 11 days, just 10, that's all. You'd be sad 11 days. All right, any other happy dollars? Okay, I'll usually give you some history. Today I'll give you a little history. Way back in 1793, it's hard to believe, the first state road was authorized. That state road went from Frankfort, Kentucky to Cincinnati. So if you've ever been to Cincinnati, throw in $1. That's followed by in 1836. This is very important now. The Toledo War, as it was unofficially known, ended. the boundary dispute between Ohio, which was a state, and that territory, because it was up north, ended. If you've ever been to the state up north, put in $1.
Territory, TTUN.
Whatever you say. And for you sports fans, a little known. In 1938, now some of you were around in 1938, the American League permitted Cleveland and Philadelphia to play night games. So if you have ever at all been outside in the nighttime, I know that's not every one of you. But I mean, there we go. All right, I'm gonna save my joke for you because you're not liking my joke, so I'm bringing you the worst country song titles that I could find. Here's number one. I'm only going to give you 3. If you moan or grin, put in another $1. So the first title is, if you don't believe I love you, just ask my wife. I know you're holding back. I've got you on my conscience, but at least you're off my back. And this one I hesitated, but I'm going to use it anyway. We used to just kiss on the lips, but now it's all over. There's the groans, I knew. There we go. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? Too tired. Oh. Not very enthusiastic.
All right, before we get to the rest of our little presentation today, I've got a special little ceremony I'd like to do. So if Gretchen and Roger would please come up. Today it is my privilege to induct Gretchen. As you may know, we approved her at the board meeting last month. Yeah, that sounds right. Over here is good. Or maybe over here. Perfect. All right. Okay. On behalf of the Dublin Worthington Rotary Club, it is my privilege to induct a new member today. Gretchen, you are beginning a great adventure in leadership, friendship, and service to your community and your fellow man. You have been invited to membership by your sponsor, Roger Johnson, and the Dublin Worthington Rotary Club has accepted you as a person of good character, high ethical standards, and a person who has the heart of service and will represent your business classification as a leader in the community. We encourage you to learn all you can about Rotary and to share your own professional and personal skills by actively participating in club activities, including attending weekly meetings, social events, and service projects. Furthermore, you will be provided with many opportunities to serve others through club service, vocational service, community service, new generation service, and international service, known as our like 4 or 5 times. All right. Our club is known for great work in the Worthington and Dublin communities and in the Dominican Republic and Mongolia. We welcome you in helping us change lives, while you have been invited to join a worldwide organization dedicated to the ideal of service. It will be through your own actions that you become a Rotarian. I am proud to be a Rotarian, and it is my pleasure to provide you with a pin by which your fellow Rotarians and community at large will recognize you as a Rotarian. We ask that you wear it proudly. Your sponsor will now pin on the Rotary emblem and give you your red name badge. Your sponsor, go ahead. This is a problem. Yeah. Perfect. I also have a challenge for you. It is for you to share the invitation that was given to you by your sponsor and to invite another person of your same qualities of character, reputation, and commitment to join our club within the next year. The honor of becoming a Rotarian is only surpassed by sponsoring a new member. Do you accept this challenge?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. And I also have a challenge for our members. Developing strong relationships among members is one of the keys to the success of our club over the past 48 years. Members, you can make yourselves to doing your part in making Gretchen feel welcome and to assist her in getting engaged in fun.
Yes.
You do.
Thank you. With that, I declare Gretchen Narciso, yes, duly inducted into Dublin Worthington Rotary Club. Thank you very much. It's painless. Easy. All right, now we are ready for. If anyone has- I will start while you're all just jumping out of your chairs to do that. So I didn't get committee for the Robert Getaway Room. We had a fantastic turnout. It was a great time. I had a good time. So kudos to that. The holiday party. You should have seen something in the newsletter, and I mean, Christy had sent out a dedicated email about it, but it is on the 28th at Buca di Beppo in Worthington. The menu, I believe, is predetermined. Is that right? Yes. It's $30 a person.
Yes.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. We're gonna have a raffle or a silent auction. I'm sorry, not a silent auction, a silent raffle. And information will be going up about that later today. We've got some great items. So we should raise a lot of money. Who else has announcements? I know you have them. Yeah.
Okay, what is February 4th, 2023? It's Super Bowling for Charity, people. And there are information on all the tables. This year, we're doing it differently. There is no competitive bowlers. Nobody's going to walk out with money in their pocket for their individual self. But all teams, whether it's a Rotary team, another Rotary team from another club, somebody from your church, somebody from where you work, somebody from another charitable organization, you know, everybody is playing for their specified charitable cause. And our two major sponsors, I want to give a shout out to the Gieslers and Cam Taylor Realty, and also to Darnell Perkins and Lincoln Financial. Let's hear it for those guys. Everybody also has the opportunity to find lane sponsors. We did this last year and it was a huge success. Sold out all 30 lanes. We have one sold so far this year. And I encourage you to get out and sell more and get out and talk to people who might want to participate in this event. Thank you.
Jim Miller, do you want to say anything about poinsettias? I think we should celebrate that.
Yeah, so I want to thank everybody who worked hard on the poinsettias, especially those that unloaded the truck on Tuesday. We did extremely well. In fact, topped last year's amount by $1,000 and raised over $3,500. 7.7. So we did a good job. I want to thank all of you. Teresa Russell was our top salesperson with 72 plans. So quite a few. So thank you again.
All right, I think that about covers it. So I think we're ready for our program. Christy, I believe you're going to do the introduction.
I'm here to introduce today's speaker, Boyce Lancaster. Boyce was born in Lubbock, Texas, and grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's an award-winning radio producer who has spent the last 25 years exploring classical music at WOSU-FM. His productions have covered a wide range of topics, including Ruby Elsie, Black Diva of the 30s, Return to Camelot, Music in the Kennedy White House, the Pro Musica Chamber Orchestra broadcasts, the Columbus Jazz Orchestra broadcasts, and many short features such as Fridays with George, featuring CSO Associate Conductor Albert George Strong. His interviews include conversations with musicians and composers, as well as luminaries such as Tony Randall, Johnny Mathis, and Henry Mancini. Voice has also provided the voice for numerous outside productions. Please join me in welcoming Voice.
Well, I'm normally the one asking the questions and not used to looking people in the eye while I do my job. So this is a little bit like a fish out of water. And then Jerry used all my jokes. He warned me he was gonna do that, and I didn't believe him, and I should have been listening. I've been around the broadcast business for my entire life. My parents were involved in it. And as I talked to my dad and mom about that, they said, well, people keep saying that radio is dead, or at least radio is something is going to kill it in the very near future. So when moving pictures came into being, one of the prognosticators of the day said that would finish off radio. Then when they added sound, well, that'll really finish the job. And then they invented television. Well, that's certainly going to take care of a medium that is sound only. Nobody's going to lie on their belly on the carpet and listen to The Shadow when they could go watch something on television or go to the movies. Then television, that next step, people like Sid Caesar came along and everybody said, well, radio is pretty well done. And then the quality of music began to improve. Recordings began to improve. The music became more portable, whether it was, of course, the other day I was in a little flea market. I digress for a moment, and I saw what they called a portable record player and a portable radio from somewhere in the 1940s. And I picked it up and it took both hands. The battery, you know what it is with cars and batteries now, and how heavy they are and how little power they can hold. Imagine lugging a radio around. It weighed about 30 pounds, I think. But let's go to the beach, honey, and listen to the radio for a while, right? And of course, after that, it was the Sony Walkman, portable CD players, MP3 players, mini disc players. I think I have at least one of each of those. Broadband internet, satellite radio, podcast, Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, TikTok, all of those have been said to be the end of the radio business. I'm going to steal somebody else's line here for a minute. There's a famous misquote of Mark Twain, which goes, the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. Well, the actual story of that, it's always fun to hear some of the reality as opposed to the popular quote. It was 1897. There was an English journalist from the New York Journal who got in touch with Mark Twain to inquire whether the rumors he was gravely ill or already dead were indeed true. So that tells me what kind of a journalist he was right there. He's calling or contacting somebody to find out if they're dead. Excuse me, sir, are you dead? And Twain wrote a response, part of which made it into the article that ran in the journal in June of that year. It said, Mark Twain was undecided whether to be more amused or annoyed when a journal representative informed him today of the report in New York that he was dying in poverty in London. The great humorist, while not very robust, is in the best of health. And he said, I can understand perfectly how the report of my illness got about. I've even heard on good authority that I was dead. James Ross Clemens, a cousin of mine, was seriously ill 2 or 3 weeks ago in London, but is well now. the report of my illness grew out of his illness, and the report of my death was an exaggeration. Now, when I first got here, I had a little chat with Jerry, who said he's going to be a very hard person to convince that radio is dead. He thinks, as did Mark Twain, that the report of its death is an exaggeration. Well, radio is still very much alive, though vastly different than it was when I was growing up. It was a much different animal. I grew up, as I said, around the broadcast business. Both of my folks were broadcasters, mainly my dad. And for some reason, the people in my family all seem to give off this vibe that we want to go to work in the middle of the night. My dad told me stories of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, going to a radio station, turning on the transmitter, trying to get things warmed up. And for some reason, I guess they decided that if it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me. So every radio station I worked for, I would start out at middays or I'd work evenings, and they said, hey, why don't you start doing 6 o'clock in the morning, or for a while, 5 o'clock in the morning, going on the air? I've never been a morning person. I'm not sure I still am, but now I can't, I still wake up at 4:30. I can't stop. And so that means my wife usually winds up having to get out of bed, which thrills her to no end. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit again here, but anyway, as I was saying, that meant you got up early, you go in, you switch things on, you get it warmed up. Radio and television were, at that point, when my dad was in the business particularly, they were live mediums. He would sit in the booth, do live commercials. The IDs were live. The news was live. Everything was done live. I had a friend of mine who tried out to be an announcer on WCBS TV in New York. And the main job was going to be stepping into the announcer's booth every 15 minutes and saying, WCBS, New York. That's all he had to do. He said, I went in there and I nailed it. Except he didn't get the job because back in that day, everybody had to have a voice that started down here. And William O. Paley just said he just didn't have it. He didn't have what WCBS needed. He wound up working in other radio stations, of course, but it was just a different animal. Music on the radio was live. My dad told me that when he was early on in the business, you'd have 2 or 3 live studios. You'd have a studio that maybe you had a small combo playing, and they're going to go off the air at 10. And so at about 9:45, the guy running the booth, running the engineering gear, was shuttling somebody else into Studio B, a barbershop quartet, a radio preacher, maybe a pianist, and they get in, and so it was this constant zoo. You had to be part radio announcer, part news guy, part ringmaster, all of it, of course, unsustainable. There's no way, if you can think about it today, there's no way that you could sustain that kind of business and make any money. You're all business people, and you know how difficult it is if you have to have one person for each and every job. And then recording machines came along. In radio, it started out, there were 16-inch transcription discs. So you've got a piece of vinyl, or actually acetate back then, about this wide, and you recorded everything on that. Interviews, commercials, music, whatever was going to be on the air that needed to be recorded was going to be on a transcription disc, and they had these massive recording machines sitting in a studio where you did these things. For most of its existence, even in the internet age, radio has been where most of us hear music first. Yep, Spotify, Sirius XM, they're all high on the list. But services such as those are essentially radio. Sirius XM, which I listen to quite a bit, is curated in the same way that radio is. It's kind of like owning hundreds of radio stations. TikTok, instead of having one person, I was a program director at one point, and instead of having one person to do the selection of all of the music has hundreds or thousands or maybe tens of thousands of people who are all deciding what you're going to watch, what you're going to hear, what you're going to see. And it's just kind of like having 24/7 request line, except that you don't get to be the DJ and you don't have to wait for the DJ to play your song. Oh, I want to hear this. I'm just going to put it up and let everybody watch me do it. I'm finding it interesting that no matter how many music services are out there, there's still some kind of excitement in turning on the radio and hearing your own voice or your music come out of it. When I do interviews with musicians, it doesn't seem to matter that they've just been on stage with 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 people in the audience. They want to know when the recording of their concert is going to be on the radio, when they can be driving down the road and turn on the radio and hear their music. I was just telling a couple of you here about a recording that's coming up this Sunday, or actually a week from Sunday, for Music and Chamber Orchestra is a good case in point. Here we have 35 musicians, 950 seats in the Southern Theater, and they all want to know when they can go online or they can turn on the radio and hear the concert they just performed. It's a stunning thing, I think, to me still, to be able to sit in a little room and realize that somebody in South Carolina, I've had letters from New Zealand, I've had emails from there. We would get underwriting donations from San Diego. There was somebody who used to live here, still listens, lives out on the West Coast, said, I just want to keep supporting this. Somebody who drove through from Philadelphia on their way to a business meeting in, I think, Indianapolis, said, well, I'm going to start supporting your station because every time I come through, I hear you on the air. And there's just, I don't know what it is about sitting there in your car or in your home or putting in your earbuds and hearing something coming out of nothing that is so fascinating. I was listening, amazingly enough, to something I was introduced to recently, Radio Santiago, a while back. I realized that while I was receiving it on my iPhone and listening to it over Wi-Fi, there was still some guy in Santiago, Chile, sitting in a little room with a stack of probably CDs, or maybe they're on a hard drive, introducing a piece of music, playing a piece of music, and then telling us what we just heard in a language that I don't speak very well. So I have no idea what he was playing, but it was fun. And it was just amazing to think, with all the changes, how little things have really changed. Radio is simply now different tools, different broadcasting and receiving equipment, but at the heart of it all, it's still radio. So, Jerry, I guess you're right. The title of this little speech would have more accurately read, Radio as we knew it is dead, but radio is still very much alive and simply has a much better delivery system. And I thought I would entertain some questions or things like that, because usually what I find is people want to know what's going on behind the scenes, backstage, odd interviews or conversations you have with people that you never get to make or bring out in the light of day. So if there are questions or anything, a gentleman always in the back. Yes, sir.
That's why I'm here. Simple question. Where did you get your mellifluous voice?
It was mail order.
Order on the radio.
Exactly. Well, my dad is a baritone. My mom is an alto, was an alto. And when I was growing up, my voice dropped when I was about 13, which my dad was the choir director at that point. He came up and said, "Boyce, I think maybe you need to sit out for a while." And then he heard me starting to crack. I was singing tenor, and about 3 weeks later, I was singing baritone. It just, it's just one of those fortunate things. I've been very blessed to have this voice. And actually, he and I sound very similar. He's 92. And he still sounds like he could sit in a studio and do a radio broadcast. It's just an amazing thing. And to talk to him about the history of his time in this business. Speaking of voices, another thing that's always interesting is accents. Johnny Carson always talked about being from Nebraska and having that kind of white bread Nebraska accent. You can't really place it anywhere. My dad was from Batesville, Arkansas. Now you can imagine what he sounded like when he talked, when he went to college. And he met my mom and he was studying radio engineering. And then he discovered that he's going to have to be sitting outside under a transmitter tower in the middle of nowhere, because that's where they put the engineers, not in the studio, but you're out in the middle of a cornfield somewhere. So he went up to her one day and said, Jan, I'm going to be on the radio. I'm going to be a radio announcer. And he said she laughed for 5 minutes. And he just became so determined that if you talk to him now, you would never know. He got completely rid of an accent that was born out of Arkansas and Texas and Oklahoma. And so I never had one, fortunately. But that's a long answer to a very short question about where this came from. Yes, sir.
What have you done if and when you ever got a serious cold?
Oh, man. That's the bane of my existence. There have been times when I've just been in the studio with a cold. The worst thing I dealt with was I started getting laryngitis about every 6 or 7 weeks at one point, early in my time at WOSU back in the late 80s, early 90s. Come to find out that I had a problem with the septum and all that kind of stuff. And I was sick. I couldn't talk. I said, I can't do this anymore. So I said, I can fix that in 30 minutes. And I fixed it up. And all of a sudden, it was wonderful. But you spend a lot of time, if you saw us in the studio, you'd think we were all hypochondriacs, especially in the winter. Microphone, we've got rags with isopropyl alcohol on them and Lysol. People are wiping and spraying. And if you walk in and you clear your throat, they think you're sick and they just push you out of the studio. It's, and then when post-COVID came around, nobody was in the studio. But having a cold, even now, even though I'm not on the air full time anymore, when I start feeling a cold coming on, I'm just miserable. I guess my wife would tell you I shouldn't be talking so much, but I can't seem to stop. I can't seem to stop. Yes, sir.
So did you know Dale Lutz?
I knew Dale Lutz very well. Dale and I played softball together a lot. We had a radio team, a softball team called the Mudders, MUDDERS. It was a media league. So we're playing Channel 10 and the Dispatch and WTBN and all the other stations. It was a very friendly rivalry, but you can imagine the trash talk was pretty creative. And it sounded very good. There were so many air people out there playing, but Dale was a pretty good third baseman. He was a pretty good third baseman. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
He's a member of this club?
He was.
Yeah.
He was? I played golf with him a couple of times, and I'll never do that again. My pockets were empty when I left. Yes, sir.
You mentioned some odd interviews. Tell us about some of your odd interviews or your favorite interviews. Give us some insights.
Well, have you ever heard of the Canadian Brass?
Yeah.
Okay, well, their first trumpeter for a long time was Jens Lindemann. Nice guy, kind of small. He came to Columbus to play with Pro Musica Chamber Orchestra. And so we sat down in a room downstairs to have a conversation about the performance. One of the things he was playing was the second Brandenburg Concerto by Bach, which has a really high piccolo trumpet part in it. And I said, Jens, before you go, I'd like to know if number one, if you have problems changing instruments because the notes are so high, the mouthpiece is so small, do you have to do anything like that? And he said, no, not really. And I said, well, how in the world do you hit all of these sky-high notes? And he sat there for a minute and said, I wear a thong. And he said, if I have to get a really high note, sometimes I just twist the elastic a little bit. And then we're walking down the hall afterwards, and he said, you can't use that. You cannot use that. I'll deny it to the death. I said, it's on tape, for crying out loud. So that was pretty awesome. I did a conversation once with, I was talking to Henry Mancini. And no matter how many times I asked him a question, I always felt like he wanted to be somewhere else. That I just wasn't quite as interesting a guy as I thought he was. And I think he'd been doing interviews all day. So by the time I got to him, it's just like, I could just see him doing this while I was having the conversation. It was an interesting conversation, but, I was talking with Jerry earlier about Zoom meetings and things. It's the same thing. There's just something about not being in the same room and trying to have that conversation with someone that makes it really, really difficult. I did an interview with a cellist by the name of Yo-Yo Ma. We were supposed to have done it just before I had a tea time. I had about 2 hours to get the interview done and then go have a tea time. And they kept calling me and saying, well, we're running a little behind. We're running a little behind. People are going home. I said, okay, I can just talk to him on the phone. Well, I keep waiting. This call keeps coming in. We're running behind. I'm on my way to the golf course by then. I interviewed Yo-Yo Ma while between the second tee and the fifth fairway on, I think it was Dornoch. We were up on Dornoch. And so I had him on speaker and I'd ask a question and then I'd mute the phone so we couldn't hear people trash talking each other when they hit bad shots and all that kind of stuff. It was a great interview on his end. And fortunately, they were recording it because I'm out on a golf course playing the worst golf of my life, but having a great conversation with a guy that if he ever found out about it, he probably would never talk to me again. I'm trying to think if there are any, that's just a few. Sometimes it's it's just the conversation is enlightening, and then you sit there for a minute and you ask a question and they finish their answer, and then you don't say anything for a second, and that's when you begin to really get the great answers. But those are just a few examples of some weirdness that I've had in my life. Yes, sir.
How much do you work with Christopher Purdy?
I worked with Christopher Purdy as much as I could stand. Christopher's a good guy. Our offices were catty corner to each other for probably 20 or 25 years. And Christopher has a big heart. He's a good guy. He's from the Northeast. He's a New Yorker, and you can tell it, but he's got a heart of gold. So, Christopher, and he's brilliant. He knows everything about opera I think there is to know. But when he starts telling stories, especially during fundraisers and things, he will swear that this story is true, and some of them are. But sometimes the accuracy begins to drop a little bit. And I'm sure I'm guilty of the same thing. But now Christopher is, in fact, he's going to wind up being there, I think, a lot longer than I was. I was there for about 34 years. And he's still going strong, shows no signs of stopping. Anyone else have a question or a comment? Yes, sir.
So tell us about how you prepare for these interviews. How long does it take you to get ready for an interview? Well, with Yo-Yo Ma, for example.
Well, that's the interesting. I found that when I quit writing down lists of questions, I actually had better conversations with people, but the lack of a list of questions still means you need to have some informed content in your brain. And so I began to realize that doing a lot of reading, especially just before I have a conversation, I like to kind of revisit the things that they want to talk about, because normally especially with musicians, they're wanting to do promote a recording or something, or maybe they've got a project they're involved in, or they're coming to play in Columbus, and you want to talk about the specifics. But then you start getting off into their lives and their careers, and you try not to ask things like, Well, when did you start playing the violin? Or how much did your violin cost? Because I see the glaze go over their faces when they get asked that question. But to find something in their life that they don't expect to be asked about. I got a really interesting story from a guy. He was one of the co-writers, and for some reason now I'm losing his name, but he helped Leonard Bernstein finish writing Mass. Bernstein hit the wall and just couldn't quite get everything done. Stephen Schwartz, that's who it was. Stephen Schwartz, he wrote a lot of the lyrics. And so he's working on this thing, got it done, but he said the Bernstein family to this day does not really acknowledge his role in putting this major piece of music out for the public. And then I asked him something about his wife's unique exit from a performance of Mass. She was in the chorus for Mass in New York City. He says, so I'm sitting there at home in our apartment, and she walks in the door. And I knew full well that the performance wasn't supposed to end for another 20 minutes. What are you doing home? She said, well, at the end of Mass, there's a point where everybody falls down, they're on the stage, they look like they're dead, nobody's moving, and she's lying back there, and she starts coughing. She gets this little tickle, and she's trying to control this thing. Now, Bernstein's conducting, so he's standing up there on the podium, and the soloist is finishing up his soliloquy, his musical soliloquy at the end, and she's going, I can't stay back here. What am I going to do? She starts crawling across the stage, trying to get out of there, finally crawls over, gets into the wings, and goes out and calls a cab and goes home. Said, I don't have anything else to do. I guess I'm just going to leave. Bernstein, she said, boy, if Leonard Bernstein saw me do that, I am in big trouble. Never a word, went back the next day, performed it again, no more coughing spells. But those are some of the interesting things that start to come up when you're talking to people. And those are the things that, if you just follow the talking points you get from the publicist, never talk to the publicist, because all they're going to tell you is what they want you to talk about. You start finding out that people have led really interesting, fascinating lives outside of what they do. There's a recorder player by the name of Mikala Petri. She's from Denmark, and hearing her talk about trying to perform with Victor Borge was an absolute stitch. In fact, there's a video, if you Google Victor Borge and Mikala Petri, Petri, there's a video of her trying to perform with him, and these things he's doing, she's trying to play a wind instrument while she's laughing. It is the funniest thing you've ever seen in your life. And when you start talking to people about things like that, or the fact that, they raise gerbils or whatever, that's when the conversation really gets good. So sometimes I barely prepare, but it's usually just because I thought of some weird little thing, and let's ask them that and see what happens. And then I never get to my questions. Yes, sir.
Where did you go to school, and what grades did you get in English and grammar?
Well, when I was in high school, my English grades were okay. My speech grades were pretty good. And my parents started working with me on reading very, very early. Then I discovered creative writing, and that's when I really got into what you could do with the English language. And that's the thing I've always enjoyed about radio, is that when you have the canvas of the human mind and the things that you can paint, the pictures you can create in somebody's mind with a couple of sound effects, a really good description or turn of phrase, and some great music, that's what's really, to me, very special about the radio business. Podcasts are an arm of that, and some of these other things. I mean, podcasts are so big, and podcasts are just radio you download. I mean, it really is all about the same. I went to college, actually, I went to Wright State, over in Dayton, and I went to a little liberal arts college that nobody's ever heard of in Northwest Arkansas, but they had an amazing broadcast major. It's where my parents went. So one of my teachers had worked for the Associated Press. We were studying news writing. And we had classes on editing audio tape, which nobody does anymore. Classes on diction. I had one semester of nothing but diction. There were classes on pronunciation and languages. I really, though, got language and diction and pronunciation kind of pounded into me when I got to Ohio State. Because all of these people had so much facility in so many different languages, and I played catch up for years before I finally began to understand what I was going to have to do to really keep up with these people, because I didn't have a music degree. My degree was completely, my background and everything, studies were completely broadcasting. So learning classical music got really interesting there for a while. Anybody else have a question or a comment? I mean, I could go on all day about studying really slowly, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. 3 minutes till 1, we have a raffle.
We do.
How much is in it?
$25 for weekly. And I forgot to ask Gary about the big pot.
Oh.
You know, if you win, he'll tell you.
Oh,
So 4-way test. Somebody left their 3 tickets at the table. Who doesn't have their tickets? I hate for you to pay. I'll keep that in mind. And if Christie, if you'll pull this, and if you pull one of these tickets to Dave, then he'll be the winner. Probably should have my glasses. What's the last 4?
8580.
Sorry.
8580.
Oh, wait, are you kidding me? Again? Didn't you learn to rock?
I haven't won this thing in 45 years, and I went like, oh, I was thinking.
4-way test,
Harry, how much was in the ace of spades?
$287.
287. Goodness. You're getting up there.
If you're full for me, 287 is spades.
622.
622. Court. Come on, Court. Bring the cards to you if I could.
He's on the way.
Get up a minute.
I'm rooting for you. I'm sorry.
Magic finger going.
Get it going. 10 diamonds. Okay. Thanks for playing. All right, as is traditional, let's do the 4-way test. So I couldn't remember the other day. I was thinking on Saturday I could get 3, but I couldn't figure out the 4. It was really embarrassing for myself. I don't know why I just admitted that. Here we go. First, is it true? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it be better? And fourth, will be better to all. Thank you, everybody. Please remember to turn your cell phones back on and remember to return your badges. Have a great rest of your week. We are adjourned.
Around a little bit.